The howling stones had never felt so cold. Silene pressed her back against the ice-crusted pillar, her breath forming small clouds that betrayed her hiding place in the shadowed alcove above the judgment hall. Below, 1,000 wolves had gathered in the torchlit cavern, their bodies packed so tightly that steam rose from the crowd like morning mist over a battlefield. She should not have come. Every survival instinct screamed at her to flee back through the passage she had discovered 3 moons ago, when she had been nothing but a healer's apprentice with no business knowing the secret ways of the mountain fortress. But Varric had not come to her in 6 days. No whispered message slipped beneath her door. No familiar warmth brushing against her mind through the bond they shared. Only silence. Absolute and terrifying silence. So she had climbed through the forgotten corridors to see for herself what kept her mate from her arms. The Alpha King stood at the center of the judgment circle, his powerful frame rigid beneath the ceremonial white furs that marked tonight's purpose. Even from this height, Silene could trace the sharp lines of his face, the dark hair that swept back from his brow like a raven's wing, the commanding presence that made wolves twice his age bare their throats in submission. For 8 months, she had known the man beneath the crown, the one who laughed quietly at her terrible jokes in the hidden grotto behind the waterfall, the one whose voice broke when he spoke of his mother's death, the one who had sunk his teeth into the soft flesh above her hip and whispered against her skin that she was his, only his, always his. When the alliance negotiations end, he had promised, his body curved around hers in the darkness, I will present you as my queen. The council cannot deny a true mate bond. Nothing in this world can keep me from you, Silene. She had believed every word. Her hand drifted to her belly, where a secret far more precious than politics had begun to grow. A secret she had been saving for tonight. For the moment he returned to their hidden sanctuary, and she could watch joy transform his solemn features. Bring forth the accused. The High Keeper's voice echoed off the ancient stones, and Silene's heart seized. Accused? The crowd parted and 4 guards dragged a figure into the circle. A woman in torn gray robes, her dark hair matted with blood, her wrists bound in iron chains that glowed faintly with suppression runes. Silene did not recognize her face, but she recognized the mark on the woman's exposed shoulder, a claiming bite, silvered with age that matched the one hidden beneath Silene's own dress. The same pattern, the same placement, the same teeth. No, that was impossible. Varric had sworn she was his only. Ilyana of the Western Reach, the High Keeper announced, you stand accused of falsely claiming a mate bond with our Alpha King, of deceiving the crown, of attempting to bind yourself to royal blood through forbidden magic. The bound woman raised her head, and Silene saw her face clearly for the first time. Beautiful, even bruised. Defiant, even in chains. I deceived no one, Ilyana spat. He came to me willingly. He spoke vows. He gave me this mark with his own teeth, and I carry his. A guard struck her silent. Silene's vision blurred. Her lungs refused to draw breath. Another woman. Another mark. Another bond. Had everything been a lie? Alpha King Varric, the High Keeper intoned, turning toward the motionless figure in white furs. You have denied this bond. You have declared this woman's claims false. Before the assembled packs of Arendor, do you stand by your rejection? Silene's gaze locked onto Varric's face, desperate to understand. Desperate to see some flicker of the man she loved. His eyes were wrong. The warm amber that had gazed at her with such tenderness was flat. Lifeless. His pupils were strange, too wide, ringed with an oily darkness that seemed to swallow the torchlight. I reject her, Varric said. His voice. Gods above, his voice was hollow, a carved-out thing with no resonance, no feeling, no soul behind the words. I have never claimed this woman. I have never touched her. She is nothing to me. Ilyana screamed, a raw animal sound of betrayal, but Silene barely heard it. Because Varric's empty eyes had moved, they swept across the crowd with mechanical precision, passing over faces without recognition, and for one terrible heartbeat, they lifted toward the shadowed alcove where Silene hid. They passed over her like she was stone. No spark, no awareness, no bond flaring to life between them. He looked directly at his mate and saw nothing at all. The rejection is witnessed, the High Keeper declared. By the laws of our ancestors, a falsely claimed wolf forfeits her place among the pack. Ilyana of the Western Reach, you are sentenced to the Frozen Walk. You will be cast beyond the fortress walls without fire or fur. If the mountain judges you worthy, you will survive until dawn. If not, he did not need to finish. Silene knew the Frozen Walk. Every wolf in Arendor knew it. A death sentence wrapped in the pretense of mercy. No one survived a winter night on the exposed peaks. No one. The guards began dragging Ilyana toward the eastern passage, and the bound woman fought with desperate fury. "Varric!" she screamed. "Varric! Look at me! You know me! You know me! Please!" The Alpha King did not flinch, did not blink, did not show any sign that he heard his own name shouted by a woman who bore his mark. And in that moment, watching another woman be dragged to her death for a crime Silene herself could have been accused of, a horrible realization crept through her. If Ilyana's mark was real, if Varric had truly claimed her and then forgotten, what would stop him from forgetting Silene too? What would stop him from standing in this very circle looking at her with those empty eyes, condemning her to freeze in the silence of the mountains she had once loved? Her hand pressed harder against her belly. Their child. Growing inside her while he stood motionless as a statue, watching a woman die for loving him. A saw built in Silene's throat, and she clamped her hand over her mouth to trap it. Below, the crowd began to chant, a low, rhythmic growl of approval for the king's justice. The torches guttered in a sudden wind that swept through the cavern, and Silene felt the temperature plunge. The fortress itself seemed to sense her grief. She had to leave. Now, before someone spotted her, before another accuser was named, before she became the next woman thrown to the mountain's mercy. But as she turned to flee into the forgotten passage, she heard a voice that froze her blood. "Father." Sirena of House Valanthor stepped from the crowd, her silver hair gleaming like a blade. "Should we not examine the healer's apprentice as well? The one who has been seen entering the eastern wing at unusual hours?" Silene's heart stopped. "I am told she bears a mark beneath her clothing. Perhaps another false claimant poisons our court." 1,000 wolves turned to scan the hall, and the Alpha King's empty eyes began to search. Silene ran. The forgotten passages swallowed her, twisting corridors of rough-hewn stone that had not seen torchlight in generations. She knew them by touch now, by the count of her footsteps, by the subtle changes in the air that told her when to turn. 8 months of secret meetings had made her a ghost in the bones of the mountain. Behind her, shouts echoed. The hunt had begun. Her lungs burned as she climbed the narrow spiral that led to the servants' quarters. The child inside her was barely aflutter, a whisper of new life, but she felt its presence with every gasping breath. "I will keep you safe," she swore silently, "whatever it takes." Her tiny chamber was exactly as she had left it, the narrow bed, the drying herbs, the small window that looked out over the western peaks. She grabbed her grandmother's pendant from beneath the mattress, her warmest cloak, the leather pouch of medicines she had prepared for the winter sickness season. There was nothing else worth taking. Nothing else that mattered. From the window, she could see the torches gathering in the courtyard below. Wolves in their fur forms, noses lifted to catch a scent. Her scent. The servants' gate. If she could reach it before they circled the fortress. Silene pulled her hood low and slipped into the corridor. The cold hit her the moment she stepped outside the fortress walls. Arendor's winter was merciless, a living thing that stripped heat from flesh and hope from hearts. Snow had begun to fall in thick curtains, and the wind howled through the peaks like a mourning wolf. She did not look back. She did not see the figure that appeared at the high tower window, staring down at her fleeing form with eyes that flickered, just for an instant, from empty black to desperate amber. She did not hear the sound that tore from his throat moments later, a howl of such anguish that wolves across the kingdom lifted their heads in shared grief, though none understood why. She had been cast out, left to freeze in silence, and no one, not a single soul, had spoken in her defense. By the time Varric clawed his way back to consciousness, fighting against the darkness that had swallowed his mind, Silene had vanished into the blizzard. He ran to her chamber in nothing but his ceremonial furs, empty. He fell to his knees on the cold stone floor, pressing his face to the pillow that still held her scent, And the Alpha King of Arendor wept. 4 months later, the village of Ashenmere had almost forgotten its mysterious newcomer. She had appeared at the height of the winter storms, a young woman, heavy with child, half frozen and barely conscious. The village healer had found her collapsed outside the shrine, her lips blue, her heartbeat fading. By all rights, she should have died. But Silene was not ready to die. She had given them a false name, called herself Ren, told them she was a widow fleeing grief, seeking somewhere quiet to birth her child and begin again. The villagers had asked few questions. Ashenmere was a place where people came to disappear, a settlement so deep in the southern valleys that the politics of kings rarely reached them. It was perfect. Now spring was fighting through the last grip of frost, and Silene had become simply the healer woman who lived at the edge of the woods. She delivered babies, she treated fevers, she brewed teas for sleeplessness and poultices for wounds. And every night she lay awake with her hands on her swollen belly, feeling movements that came from two different places at once. Twins. The village midwife had confirmed it a month ago, clucking with amazement at how large Silene had grown. Strong little ones, the old woman had said. They'll be fighters. Strong like their father, Silene thought, before she could stop it, before she could slam the door on memories that still drew blood. 4 months, and the wound had not begun to close. If anything, it had festered deeper. The mark on her hip, the claiming bite Varric had given her in the grotto behind the waterfall, should have faded by now. A rejected bond always dissolved. The mark should have silvered, then vanished, leaving only smooth skin and bitter memories. Instead, it burned. Not painfully, not quite, but constantly, a low heat that pulsed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Some nights, when the wind blew from the north, from the direction of the mountain fortress, the burning intensified until she gasped aloud. And sometimes, she felt something through it, a presence, searching, desperate, like claws scraping against the walls of her mind, trying to find a way back in. Silene told herself it was phantom sensation. Told herself the bond was dead, that Varric had made his choice when he looked through her with those empty eyes, that hoping for anything else was a poison she could not afford to drink. But the mark kept burning, and her dreams kept filling with amber eyes that wept as they searched for her through endless snow. A knock at her door shattered the silence. Silene's hand flew to the knife beneath her pillow before she recognized the voice. "Mistress Wren?" Young Tessa, the miller's daughter. "Are you awake? Father sent me to fetch you. There are strangers in the village." Strangers. Silene's blood cooled. What kind of strangers? Soldiers, I think, from the north. They're asking questions about a woman. The mark on her hip flared with sudden searing heat, and through the window, silhouetted against the pale morning sky, Silene saw shapes emerging from the tree line. Wolves. 5 of them. Massive. Silver-furred. Their amber eyes fixed on her cottage with an intelligence that was anything but animal. After 4 months of hiding, the hunt had finally found her. Silene pulled Tessa inside and shut the door. "Tell me everything," she commanded, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "What are these soldiers asking?" Tessa's eyes were wide with excitement and fear, the thrill of witnessing something extraordinary in a village where nothing ever happened. They arrived at dawn. 6 of them, plus their commander. They've taken over the tavern and they're interviewing everyone. Interviewing about what? A woman. Tessa leaned closer, dropping her voice to a whisper. They say the Alpha King himself has sent them, that he's been searching for someone for months, a healer with dark hair and... Her gaze dropped to Silene's swollen belly, and that she might be carrying his child. The room tilted. Silene gripped the table's edge until her knuckles whitened. That's quite a tale. There's more. Tessa's voice dropped even lower. The traders who passed through last week spoke of it too. They say the king has gone mad, Mistress Wren. Completely mad. Mad how? He's torn apart the entire northern territory searching for this woman, executed 3 of his own advisors for hiding information. The mountain fortress has been sealed. No one enters or leaves without his personal approval. Tessa shivered. They say the winter hasn't ended in Arendor. 4 months past the thaw, and snow still falls on the peaks. The crops won't grow. The livestock are dying. It's like the land itself is grieving. Silene's mark pulsed with heat. The land grieving. And Alpha's bond with his territory ran deep, deeper than politics, deeper than blood. If Varric was truly suffering, truly broken, the kingdom would reflect his pain. But why would he suffer? He had rejected her. He had looked through her like glass. Unless... The reward, Tessa continued breathlessly. 20,000 gold pieces for information, 50,000 for the woman herself, delivered unharmed. Can you imagine? 50,000 gold. Silene forced a smile. Fortune hunters will be crawling through every village in the realm. That's what Father said. Tessa moved toward the door, then paused. Mistress Wren? You're not... you couldn't be... I'm a widow from the eastern provinces, Silene said firmly. Nothing more. But after Tessa left, Silene sank onto her bed with shaking legs. He was searching for her. The man who had condemned another woman to freeze for the crime of bearing his mark was now spending a king's fortune to find Silene. It made no sense, unless something had been terribly, terribly wrong that night in the judgment hall. Through her window, the wolves had moved closer. Their amber eyes never wavered from her door, and the mark on her hip burned like a promise, or a warning. The knock came an hour later, not the tentative tap of a villager seeking medicine, but a firm, deliberate strike that rattled the wooden frame. Silene gripped the iron poker from her hearth and positioned herself behind the door. Mistress Wren, a male voice, deep and measured. My name is Hadron. I serve as First Beta to the Alpha King. You no harm, but we must speak. Lives depend on it. Silene's heart slammed against her ribs. First Beta, Varric's most trusted warrior, his second in command. I have nothing to say to the king's men, she called back. Then say nothing. Only listen. A pause. Please. I have traveled 4 months to find you. What I have to tell you changes everything. Against every instinct, Silene opened the door. The man on her threshold was tall and broad, his dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. His face bore the weathered lines of a soldier who had seen too many battles, but his eyes, a deep amber that marked him as pure-blooded wolf, held something she had not expected. Compassion. May I enter? He asked quietly. Silene stepped aside, poker still clutched in her hand. Hadron surveyed her small cottage, the herbs, the simple furniture, the narrow bed. His gaze lingered on her swollen belly, and something like grief flickered across his features. How far along? He asked softly. That's not your concern. It is entirely my concern. Hadron turned to face her fully. Because the children you carry are heirs to the throne of Arendor, and there are those who would kill to prevent them from ever drawing breath. Children. He knew about the twins. Silene's grip tightened on the poker. I don't know what you're talking about. My husband. You have no husband. Hadron's voice was gentle but firm. You are Silene, daughter of the Eastern Healer bloodline. You bear the king's claiming mark on your left hip, given in the grotto behind the western waterfall 8 months ago. And you fled the fortress the night Ilyana of the Western Reach was condemned to the Frozen Walk. Every word struck like a physical blow. How? Because I was there when Varric gave you that mark. I guarded the passage while you met in secret. I have known about your bond since the beginning. Hadron's expression hardened. And I was there when they poisoned him. The room seemed to contract around her. Poisoned, Silene repeated. A compound derived from Moonsbane root mixed with essence of Shadowthorn. It suppresses the wolf, severs the bond, leaves the victim conscious but empty. A puppet that walks and speaks but cannot feel, cannot remember, cannot recognize even its own mate. The empty eyes, the hollow voice, the way he had looked through her like she was made of air. Who? The word came out as a snarl. Isha House Velenthor. Hadron spat the name like poison. Serena and her father have been planning this for years. They poisoned both Varric and Ilyana's mate, a minor lord who discovered their plot. When Ilyana tried to expose them, they arranged for her to be dragged before the king while he was still under the compound's influence. She was innocent, Silene breathed. They killed an innocent woman. They tried to kill an innocent woman. Hadron's lips curved into a grim smile. Ilyana survived the frozen walk. She's been hiding in the eastern provinces, gathering evidence. But she is not who the Velenthors fear most. Me. You. Hadron withdrew a folded parchment from his coat. This was intercepted by one of my wolves 3 weeks ago. Silene took the letter with numb fingers. The seal was broken, but she recognized the silver serpent of House Velenthor pressed into the dark wax. The message was brief. The king's madness grows. He will find her eventually. Eliminate the healer and the abominations she carries before the next full moon. Make it look like bandits. Leave no witnesses. Abominations. Her children. They had called her children abominations. The full moon is in 6 days, Hadron said quietly. The assassins are already here, Silene. I've been tracking them since the southern border. That's why I revealed myself now. We are out of time. As if summoned by his words, a howl split the morning air. Not the silver wolves who had watched her cottage. Something else. Something darker. Hadron was at the window instantly, his body coiled with sudden tension. They've found us. His voice dropped to a growl. The Velenthor wolves. At least a dozen of them. Through the glass, Silene saw shapes pouring from the forest. Black-furred wolves with eyes that gleamed red in the pale light, their movements coordinated with predatory precision. And behind them, walking calmly through the chaos, a figure in a dark cloak carrying a crossbow etched with silver runes, an executioner's weapon. Is there another way out? Hadron demanded. Selene's hand moved to her belly. The twins kicked sharply as if they sensed the danger closing around them. The root cellar, she said, but they'll smell us within minutes. Then we don't hide. Hadron drew a sword from beneath his cloak, the blade gleaming with oiled steel. We fight. Another howl. Closer now. And the mark on Silene's hip erupted with heat so intense she cried out, doubling over as fire raced through her veins. He was coming. She didn't know how she knew, but the certainty was absolute. Varric had felt her fear through the bond, and he was coming. The only question was whether he would arrive before the assassins finished their work. The window exploded inward. Silene threw herself sideways as a black wolf crashed through the frame, its jaws snapping at the space where her throat had been. She hit the ground hard, her belly taking the impact in a way that sent terror spiking through her chest. The babies. Gods. The babies. Hadron intercepted the wolf mid-lunge, his sword carving a silver arc that opened the creature's flank. It yelped and twisted away, but 2 more were already pouring through the shattered window. Get to the cellar! Hadron roared. But the door burst open before Silene could move. 3 wolves. Then 4. Black fur and red eyes and the stench of bloodlust filling her tiny cottage. Hadron fought like a demon, his blade singing through the air, but he was one wolf against many. He was losing. A massive black shape lunged past his guard, jaws closing on his sword arm with a sickening crunch. Hadron screamed and dropped to one knee, blood spraying across the floor. Run! He bellowed. Silene scrambled backward until her spine hit the wall. The wolves circled her now, their red eyes gleaming with triumph. She could see the intelligence in them. These were not feral beasts, but trained killers following orders. The cloaked figure stepped through the doorway, crossbow raised. The king's whore. A female voice purred from beneath the hood. Sirena sends her regards. Silene recognized the weapon now. A Heartseeker bolt, designed to punch through wolf and human flesh alike. 1 shot, and her children would die with her. Please, she heard herself whisper. Not the babies. Please, not the babies. Especially the babies. The woman's finger tightened on the trigger. We can't have any loose ends, can we? Something inside Silene cracked open. She had spent her entire life hiding what she was. The healing gift that ran through her bloodline was acceptable. Expected even. But the other thing, the deeper thing, the power that had slept in her bones since childhood, that she had been taught to fear. But fear meant nothing when her children were about to die. Silene stopped hiding. Golden light erupted from her palms. It was nothing like her healing gift, soft and gentle and warm. This was a wildfire, a son being born, and a force that had waited 23 years to be unleashed. The light slammed outward in a blazing ring, and every wolf it touched was thrown backward with a howl of agony. The assassin's crossbow shattered in her hands. "What?" The woman gasped, stumbling back. "What are you?" Silene rose to her feet, and she was glowing. Light poured from her skin, her eyes, the very air around her. The twins inside her responded to the power, their own nascent gifts stirring, amplifying, feeding into hers until she blazed like a star given flesh. "I am their mother," Silene said, and her voice carried harmonics that shook the walls. "And you will not touch them." She thrust her hand toward Hadrian, and golden fire poured into his wounds. Bones snapped back into place, flesh knitted together. Within seconds, the first beta was rising, whole and strong, and staring at her with something like awe. "My lady," he breathed. The surviving wolves had fled whimpering into the forest, but the assassin remained, drawing a silver dagger from her belt with shaking hands. "Sirena will send more," she hissed. 100 more. You cannot kill us all." "I don't need to kill you all." Silene stepped forward, light blazing around her like armor. The assassin retreated, then turned and ran into the trees. Silene let her go. The power was fading now, draining from her body like water from a cracked vessel. She swayed, her vision blurring, her legs threatening to buckle. Hadrian caught her before she fell. "Easy," he murmured, lowering her gently to the ground. "Easy, my lady. You've done more than enough." "The babies," she gasped. "Are they? Feel them yourself." Silene pressed her trembling hands to her belly. 2 kicks, strong and indignant, from opposite sides. They were alive. They were safe. She laughed, a broken, sobbing sound, and tears streamed down her face. But Hadrian was no longer looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the forest's edge, his body tensing with sudden alertness. "My lady," he said slowly, "we need to move. Now." "Why?" "The assassins fled." "It's not the assassins?" Silene followed his gaze, and her heart stopped. A shape was emerging from the trees, a wolf larger than any she had ever seen, its fur black as a moonless night, its eyes blazing with golden fire that matched the light she had just wielded. The bond on her hips screamed to life. Every nerve in her body recognized him. The Alpha King had arrived. The wolf that stepped into the clearing was destruction given form. Silene had seen Varric's shifted shape before. In the moonlit grotto, in the secret passages, in stolen moments when he let his wolf brush against her human skin. But this was something else entirely. This was a creature that had spent 4 months hunting, grieving, and tearing itself apart from the inside. He was enormous, larger than she remembered, as if rage and desperation had fed his wolf until it threatened to consume everything else. His black fur was matted in places, scarred in others, and his eyes burned with golden fire and absolute recognition. The bond between them roared to life. Silene gasped as sensation flooded through her. 4 months of suppressed connection exploded in a single moment. She felt his emotions crash into hers, fury so vast it threatened to level mountains, relief so profound it brought her to her knees, and beneath it all, a love so desperate it had driven a king to madness. The massive wolf approached slowly, each step deliberate. Hadrian moved to intercept him, but Varric's growl shook the earth itself. The beta froze, then lowered his head in submission. The Alpha King had eyes only for her. He stopped before her trembling form, his great head level with her face. Those burning golden eyes searched hers, looking for rejection, for fear, for any sign that she would flee again. Instead, Silene raised her hand and pressed it to his muzzle. "You found me," she whispered. A sound emerged from his throat, not a growl, not a howl, but something between. A whimper of pure anguish and overwhelming relief. Then his nose dropped to her belly. The twins responded instantly, kicking against the place where their father's breath warmed her skin. Varric made that broken sound again, pressing closer, as if he could somehow hold all 3 of them in his wolf form. "Shift," Silene breathed. "Please, I need to see you." The transformation rippled through him like water. And then he was kneeling before her, a man instead of a beast, his powerful frame bare to the cold morning air, his face streaked with tears that fell without shame. "Silene." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "Silene," Silene, Silene. He reached for her belly, then stopped, his hands hovering inches from her dress. May I? He asked. The Alpha King of Arendor, the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms, was asking permission to touch his own children. Something cracked inside her chest. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. Both twins kicked at once. Varric's composure shattered completely. For a long moment there was only the sound of his ragged breathing. Then Silene pulled away. No. She stepped backward, wrapping her arms around herself. The warmth of the bond, the overwhelming relief of being found, none of it erased what she had witnessed. You don't get to kneel before me and weep after what you did. Varric's face contorted with anguish. Silene, I was there. The words tore from her throat. I hid in the alcove above the howling stones and watched you condemn a woman to death. Watched you reject her with that hollow voice. Watched you look directly at me with those dead eyes and see nothing. She was shaking now, 4 months of grief and rage and betrayal pouring out like poison from a wound. I carried your children through a blizzard that should have killed me. I rebuilt my life from nothing while you sat on your throne and I sat on nothing. Varric's voice cracked. I spent 3 days in darkness, aware of nothing, feeling nothing. And when I woke, screaming your name, I learned that I had sentenced an innocent woman to die and driven my mate into the frozen wilderness. He rose to his feet, and she saw the cost of those 4 months written on his body. He was thinner than she remembered, his cheeks hollowed, his eyes ringed with shadows that spoke of sleepless nights. They poisoned me. The words were raw. The Velenthors slipped Moonsbane into my wine. It severed me from my wolf, from our bond, from everything that made me who I am. I was a puppet, Silene, a hollow shell speaking words I would have died before uttering. How convenient. The bitter laugh escaped before she could stop it. Convenient. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You think any part of this has been convenient? I have torn my kingdom apart searching for you. I have executed men who knew where you were and said nothing. I have watched my lands wither and my people suffer because my wolf has been howling for its mate every moment of every day. Your kingdom suffers because of your bond with it, Silene shot back. Not because of me. You are my kingdom. The roar shook the trees. You are everything. My wolf knows it. The land knows it. Every creature in Arendor feels the wrongness of our separation. His voice broke. I felt you, Silene. Every night when I managed to sleep, I reached for you through the bond. I begged you to come back. I told you I was searching. The dreams. Silene's anger faltered. The dreams she had dismissed as wishful thinking. Amber eyes weeping through endless snow. A voice calling her name across vast distances. Warmth brushing against her mind like desperate fingers. Those were real? She whispered. My wolf would not let you go. Even when I was awake and half mad with grief, he reached for you. He refused to accept that you were gone. Varric stepped closer, his hand rising to cup her face. Tell me you felt it. Tell me I was not howling into emptiness. She should pull away, should maintain the walls she had built around her shattered heart. Instead, she leaned into his touch. I felt it, she admitted. The burn that never faded. The presence searching for me in the darkness. I thought I was losing my mind. You were the only thing keeping me sane. His forehead pressed against hers. The bond we share, it should have died when you believed I rejected you. But it held. It held because what we have is true. Silene. Fated. Unbreakable. They're still out there. Her voice trembled. The Velenthors. They want me dead. They called our children abominations. Varric's eyes blazed with sudden terrifying fury. Then the Velenthors will learn what happens to those who threaten my mate and my heirs. His hands moved to cradle her belly. I have not touched another since I gave you this mark. I have not even stood in the same room as Serena without wanting to tear out her throat. The kingdom whispers that I have gone mad. A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. Perhaps they are right. But it is a madness born of love, and I will not apologize for it. His lips found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, seeking permission. But when Celine's fingers curled into his hair, pulling him closer, something ignited between them. The bond exploded. 4 months of separation, of grief, of desperate longing. All of it poured through the connection in a flood of shared sensation. She felt his heartbeat sync with hers, felt the twins respond to their father's presence, kicking joyfully against hands that had finally found them. When they broke apart, both were trembling. Together, Varric swore, "From this moment until my last breath, I will not lose you again." Silene pressed her hand over his heart. Together. But Hadrian's voice shattered the moment. "My king, my lady." His tone was urgent, fearful. A rider approaches from the north. He bears grave news. The rider was barely more than a boy, one of Hadrian's scouts, his horse lathered with sweat, and his face gray with exhaustion. "My king," he gasped, sliding from his saddle. "The fortress has fallen." The world seemed to tilt. "Explain," Varric commanded, his arm tightening around Silene. "House Valanthor struck at midnight. 3 days passed. They had allies among the guard. Wolves we trusted for years." The scout's voice cracked. "Lord Valanthor has declared himself regent. He claims you have gone mad, that you have abandoned your duties to chase a phantom." "And Sirena?" Silene asked quietly. The scout's eyes dropped. "Lady Sirena has been declared queen. She claims a mate bond with the king, witnessed by the High Keeper himself." A snarl tore from Varric's throat. "That is a lie." "The people believe it, my king. Valanthor has controlled the message for 3 days. Anyone who protests has been arrested as a traitor." The scout hesitated. "There is more." "Speak." "They have taken hostages. Servants who remained loyal to you. Guards who refused to kneel. 43 wolves in total." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They are scheduled for execution at moonrise tonight, a public display to cement Valanthor's authority." Silene's heart clenched. "Who among them?" I have a list, my lady." The scout withdrew a crumpled parchment. "But one name, in particular." Hadrian took the list and his face went pale. "Marin," he said heavily, "the healer who trained Lady Selene, who helped conceal her meetings with the king." Old Marin, who had covered for Silene's absences without ever asking why, who had pressed herbs for morning sickness into her hands with a knowing smile, who had risked everything for a girl she loved like a daughter. "We have to save them," Silene said fiercely. Varric turned to her. "Silene, you cannot enter that fortress. If the Valanthors capture you, if we do nothing, 43 innocent wolves die. Wolves who suffered because they were loyal to you, to us." Her chin lifted. "I will not hide while others pay the price for loving me." She expected him to argue, to command her to remain behind where it was safe. Instead, Varric's expression shifted to something like wonder. "My queen," he murmured. "Even now, carrying our children, facing your own death, you think of others first." "Someone has to." He smiled, the first real smile she had seen since that night in the grotto, 8 months ago. "Then we ride together." He turned to address the wolves who had gathered around them. "The Valanthors believe they have won. They believe their treachery has succeeded. That their false queen sits secure upon a stolen throne." His eyes blazed gold. "They are wrong." A howl rose from the assembled wolves, then another. Dozens of voices joining in a chorus of fury and loyalty. "Tonight, we take back what is ours. Tonight, we show the traitors what happens to those who threaten our true queen and the heirs she carries." Varric lifted Silene onto his horse with impossible gentleness, then mounted behind her, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. "Hold tight," he murmured against her hair. "We ride for Arendor." The army surged forward into the fading light, and Silene prayed they would not be too late. They reached the mountain fortress as the moon began its ascent. The howling stones loomed against the night sky, but the banners that flew from its peaks were wrong. Silver serpents on black fields, the colors of House Valanthor, had replaced the crimson wolf of the true king. "The Eastern Passage," Silene whispered. "The one I used to escape. It leads directly to the Judgment Hall." Varric's jaw tightened. "If Valanthor has discovered it." "He hasn't. No one knows those corridors except me." She met his gaze steadily. Let me go first. Alone. Absolutely not. Varric, think. If you storm the hall with an army, Valanthor will execute the hostages before you reach them. But if I walk in alone, you walk into your own death. I walk into a negotiation. Her hand pressed against his chest. I am what they want. The obstacle to Serana's claim. If I offer myself in exchange for the hostages, I will not let you sacrifice yourself. You won't have to. Silene's eyes held a confidence that surprised even her. I am not the helpless healer's apprentice I was 4 months ago. You saw what I did to those assassins. The power inside me. It's awake now. Our children woke it. She could see him warring with himself. The alpha who wanted to protect his mate against the king who understood tactical necessity. I'll feel you through the bond, she continued softly. If anything goes wrong, you'll know instantly. You'll have an army ready to break down the doors. Selene, trust me. She rose on her toes to press a kiss to his lips. As I am learning to trust you again. The words found their mark. Varric closed his eyes, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. If they hurt you, he said quietly, I will tear this mountain down stone by stone. I know. If they threaten our children, they won't get the chance. She pulled away before he could change his mind. The forgotten passages were exactly as she remembered. Dark, narrow, thick with dust. But her body knew the way, and within minutes, she stood before the hidden door that opened behind the Judgment Hall's great throne. She could hear voices beyond. Lord Valanthor's pompous tones, Serana's sharp commands, and beneath it all, the quiet weeping of wolves awaiting execution. Silene pressed her hand to her belly one final time. Be brave, she whispered to her children. Your mother is about to do something very stupid. Then she pushed open the door and stepped into the torchlight. Silence crashed over the Judgment Hall. 1,000 faces turned toward the pregnant woman who had emerged from behind the throne as if conjured from shadow. Lord Valanthor's mouth fell open. Serana's pale face flushed with sudden vicious triumph, and the 43 hostages, kneeling in chains before the execution platform, stared at Silene with a mixture of hope and horror. The ghost returns, Serana purred, recovering first. How convenient of you to save us the trouble of hunting you down. Release the hostages, Silene's voice carried across the hall. All of them, now. Lord Valanthor laughed. You are in no position to make demands, girl. Guards, seize her. Wolves moved toward her from both sides. Silene stood her ground. I said, golden light flickered beneath her skin. Release them. The approaching guards hesitated, uncertainty crossing their faces. I am Silene of the Eastern Healer bloodline. I carry the true king's heirs, and I am offering you a trade. Her gaze locked with Valanthor's. Me for them, my life for their freedom. Selene, no. Old Marin's voice rose from among the hostages. Be silent, old woman. Karena descended from the throne, her silver hair gleaming. The offer is interesting, but why should we honor any bargain? We have the fortress, we have the hostages, and in moments, we will have you. Because your assassins failed. Silene let the words land. Because Varric knows everything. The poisoning, the conspiracy, the murder you attempted on his true mate. And because there is an army of loyal wolves outside these walls waiting for my signal. Something flickered in Serana's eyes. Fear, quickly masked. Kill her, Lord Valanthor commanded. Kill her now, before... Serana was faster. She drew a dagger from her sleeve, silver-edged, gleaming with poison, and lunged. The blade descended toward Selene's belly, and stopped. Selene's hand had caught Serana's wrist, and her grip was no longer human. Golden light exploded through the hall. The transformation that had threatened since her children woke her power finally completed itself. Bone and muscle reshaped. Skin rippled with emerging fur. Silene's human scream became a wolf's howl as her body surrendered to the change. When the light faded, a wolf stood where the pregnant woman had been. White as fresh snow. Large as a warhorse. Eyes blazing with amber fire that matched the king's own. And somehow, impossibly, still carrying the swell of her unborn children. The silver dagger clattered to the ground, dropped from Serana's nerveless fingers. Silene's wolf lunged, her jaws closed on Lord Valenthor's throat before anyone could move. One shake, and the architect of all her suffering fell lifeless to the stones. Chaos erupted. The great doors of the judgment hall exploded inward. Varric burst through in full wolf form, his black fur bristling with fury, his eyes finding Silene across the carnage. Their wolves recognized each other instantly, two halves of a single whole, finally reunited in their truest forms. Together, they turned on the remaining Valanthor guards. The battle was brief and brutal. Wolves loyal to the true king poured through the shattered doors, overwhelming the traitors within minutes. Sirena tried to flee, but Hadrian's jaws closed on her arm, dragging her down. When it was over, the silver serpent banners lay trampled in blood, and Silene stood in human form once more, her white dress torn, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her head held high. The hostages were freed. Old Marin embraced her with tears streaming down her weathered face, and through it all, Varric never left her side. "You shifted," he breathed, wonder in his voice. "While carrying the twins, that should be impossible." "Our children are determined," Silene replied, one hand pressed to her belly. "Like their father." Varric pulled her into his arms. "Like their mother," he corrected. "My brave, impossible queen." The great hall of the Howling Stones had never held so much hope. 3 days had passed since the Valanthor defeat. Sirena awaited judgment in the deepest cells, her title stripped, her wolf suppressed by the same Moonsbane compound her family had used on the king. A fitting justice. But tonight was not about vengeance. Tonight, under the light of a full moon streaming through the ancient windows, the true Alpha Queen of Arendor would be claimed. Silene stood at the center of the judgment circle where she had once hidden in shadows. Her white gown flowed over the swell of her belly, and the claiming mark on her hip pulsed with pleasant warmth. Around her, 1,000 wolves waited in reverent silence. Many of them had watched Ilyana be condemned in this very hall, had cheered for a judgment they now knew was false. Shame hung heavy in the air, but Silene had spoken to them earlier, offering forgiveness. "We were all victims of Valanthor's poison," she had said. "What matters now is what we build together." Varric approached through the parted crowd, and her breath caught at the sight of him. He wore ceremonial black and silver, but his eyes held nothing of the emptiness that had haunted her nightmares. They blazed with love, with pride, with a devotion that made her heart ache. He stopped before her and sank to his knees. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Alpha King, kneeling before a healer's apprentice. "Silene of the Eastern bloodline," Varric said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I have wronged you. Not by choice, but by my failure to protect you from those who wished you harm. I cannot undo the months of suffering. I cannot give you back the time we lost." His hands reached up to cradle her belly. "But I can offer you everything I have. My crown, my kingdom, my wolf, my soul." His voice cracked. "They have always been yours. They will always be yours." He tilted his head, baring his throat in the ancient gesture of complete submission. "Claim me," he whispered. "Make it complete. Let no force in this world or any other ever separate us again." Silene's eyes burned with tears. She bent and pressed her lips to the place where his pulse thundered. Then, letting instinct guide her, she bit down. The bond exploded between them. It was not pain, but completion. Two souls that had been torn apart finally becoming whole. She felt Varric's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion, every secret hope and desperate fear. She saw herself through his eyes, not a nobody apprentice, but a woman of extraordinary courage, the mother of his children, his fated mate, the most precious soul in his existence. And he saw himself through hers, a man worth forgiving, worth loving, worth fighting beside for all their years to come. When she finally released him, both were weeping. Varric rose and claimed her lips in a kiss that spoke louder than any vow. Around them, 1,000 wolves lifted their voices in celebration. 2 months later, as spring burst across Arendor in a riot of color, Silene gave birth to twins. A boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's healing gift. A girl with fur as white as snow when she shifted, and eyes that already blazed with amber fire. Varric held his children with tears streaming down his face, his massive warrior's hands impossibly gentle. "Thank you," he whispered to Silene, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed, "for fighting for us, for believing, even when I gave you every reason not to." Silene reached up to touch the claiming mark on his throat, the mark that matched the one on her hip, both now healed into beautiful silver scars. "I never stopped believing," she said softly. "Even in the darkest moments, something inside me knew. We were always meant to find our way back to each other." Varric leaned down to kiss her, their children nestled safely between them. "Always," he agreed. "In this life and every life that follows. You are my soul, Silene, my bond, my forever." Outside their window, the wolves of Arendor lifted their voices in a howl of joy. The winter that had gripped the land finally released its hold. Crops that had withered began to grow. Rivers that had frozen solid ran free once more. The kingdom healed as its king had healed. And in the great tapestry of Arendor's history, a new chapter was woven. The story of a healer's apprentice who was left to freeze in silence, of an alpha king who tore apart his realm to find her, of a bond that could not be broken by poison or politics or even death itself. They had found each other against impossible odds, and they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story.